There's something about me in that case that isn't quite trustworthy or that doesn't quite add up. And often this is the place where others are like, I don't really know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something about that person. When we get members at the Thought Leader Academy, many of them come in with beliefs and stories about themselves. Now, sometimes these are good beliefs and stories, but most of the time they're not. In fact, most of the time, those beliefs and stories are actually holding them back. Those stories are often rooted in perceptions of themselves. This is something we call status, which is an acting term. And think of status as a triangle, and it's really made up of three parts: how I perceive myself, how I perceive that others perceive me, and how others actually perceive me. And status is how we are showing up emotionally, intellectually, and physically. It has nothing to do with our socioeconomic status. So the how we perceive ourselves is pretty easy, right? We can look internally and say, this is what I think of myself. And it might be really good. We may have a really high opinion of who we are and how we show up in the world. But the how I perceive that you perceive me is the tricky one, because we're in control of that. But yet it's a perception that I have of how my audience is perceiving me. And if I believe that you're seeing me in a way that's different than I see me, what I'm doing is I'm creating a dichotomy in myself, because I believe one thing about myself and I believe that you think something else about me. And what happens is I start to project onto you that dichotomy. And you, as the person receiving that, feel it in the way that I'm showing up. There's something about me in that case that isn't quite trustworthy or that doesn't quite add up. And often this is the place where others are like, I don't really know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something about that person. It's often in that self perception where we're projecting something onto that person that is other than they feel and other than we feel about ourselves. So, what this really is an unconscious sabotaging of ourselves. And these are driven by unconscious limiting beliefs. So, how do we overcome unconscious limiting beliefs? Now, again, at the Thought Leader Academy, we go deep into mindset, and it's something that we work on a lot. And we've developed a little process for being able to address limiting beliefs. To do that, one of the first things that needs to happen is you need to surface it, write it down, get it out of your mind. Once we've written it down, we've got it out of our mind, it's not active there, but we now have to ask ourselves, we have to assess, is it true? Now, this is a tricky one too, because we're often so hard on ourselves. So we surface the limiting belief. Maybe it's, I don't have the education to be a thought leader. And you ask yourself, is it true? Well, is there truth in that? Yes, there is. In my case, I don't have a lot of formal education. But here's the thing, it's not fully true. I've got almost 35 years of experience, the last 10 of which have been working directly with experts and thought leaders, where I've been working, learning so much about their areas of expertise, where I've been developing my own craft. And I had 25 years before that, where I had deep expertise in communications and human behavior. So is it true that I don't have the education to be a thought leader? Not really. I mean, I have formal education, but I've got 35 years of experience and informal executive education that inform my view as a thought leader. Now, the next piece is acknowledge. Acknowledge yourself. Celebrate where you're making progress. So when you're in the process of overcoming a limiting belief, you need to recognize the limiting belief is active. So in my case, let's say I have the limiting belief that says, I don't have the education to be a thought leader. And then I've assessed it and said, well, it's not fully true. Now, when that gets activated, I have to acknowledge it. So let's say that I get asked to be on a global stage, and suddenly I feel that imposter syndrome coming up. Now, maybe the first time that happens, I turn down that opportunity and go, no, no, that's not me. I can't do that. And then in the after effects of it, I recognize, oh, that was my limiting belief at work. And I should have said yes. Now I've got to acknowledge myself and go, there it is. Great. I didn't get it that time. I'll get it earlier the next time because it's a process. You don't overcome a limiting belief overnight. You don't do it the first time. You've got to celebrate where you're making progress. See it as a process. It's not the outcome. This is a perfect example of progress, not perfection. So, where are we in the process? Surface the limiting belief. Assess, ask yourself, is it true? Acknowledge when you recognize you've got that belief activated. The next, reframe it. Now I want you to rewrite that belief. Give yourself something positive to reframe it with. So if I take my little example of I don't have the education to be a thought leader, I would reframe that to say I have a deep and rich experiential base to draw upon that builds and informs my thought leadership because of the people I work with and for. Now I've got a mantra. And every time that limiting belief is activated, I can say that in my head at some point, whether I catch it at the point that the limiting belief is coming up or I catch it after, I give myself that mantra to say. And then I repeat it over and over again until I believe it, because that's the thing. When we talked about status earlier, it was my perception of me and my perception of how you perceive me informs how you actually perceive me. And so when I'm repeating that mantra over and over again, I am now changing my perception of how you perceive me. Because what I'm doing is I'm giving myself the proof, the knowledge that I actually have what I need to be a thought leader. And I believe it. So the next time you meet me, that dichotomy that you had met before starts to go away. And you say, oh, you've changed. You feel different. That's what it is to step into your thought leadership without the burden of those unconscious limiting beliefs being in the way. Because when we surface our limiting beliefs and make them conscious, we can address them. And this is the first part of stepping into and building an intentional personal brand.